This week on the podcast, we have Mandy LeBlanc joining us. She is here to help us wrap up this month of menopause awareness or perimenopause awareness. And we're going to dive into more conversations, more tools and tips on how we can navigate this really big transitional time for women in their life. Mandy is a certified holistic nutritional consultant specializing in hormone nutrition, an EFT tapping practitioner, and a registered massage therapist. She has been working with women in holistic wellness since 2002 and is determined to guide women on a journey to reclaiming their energy and vitality. Upholding a mantra of empowered health from pre-puberty through menopause and beyond, she inspires others to become the CEO of their own health. And in today's conversation, we're hoping it does the same for you. Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. Welcome, Mandy, to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on here. And I'm even more excited because I just discovered you live in the same province as me, which never happens on this podcast. So I am so excited because I'm in Edmonton and you're in Banff. Am I correct?
I'm in Banff. Yes. Oh, yeah. I was wondering if I thought we probably were in the same province just based on some of what I've seen on your Instagram. And that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me, Kate. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, I'm just really excited to talk with you today.
Yeah. So this is our last episode that we're going to be doing to really own in on perimenopause and menopause, because October is Menopause Awareness Month. I think a lot of women get confused because they don't really know the term perimenopause. They know the term menopause, and we think that that encapsulates everything in this experience that we're going through in this middle life age, I guess. But we don't realize a lot of the perimenopause or this idea of postmenopause. And a part of that's because nobody talks about it in our culture. This is kind of like this silent thing that women just go through, much like our periods, much like puberty. It's just these things that we just happens to us and nobody ever shares their wisdom, at least in my case. So I would love to learn more about how you got into perimenopause and menopause. What drove you to wanting to be in this field of interest?
Absolutely. So yeah, I agree. I feel like it hasn't been talked about enough in the past. I feel like there's a lot more talk about it now. I actually don't even love the word perimenopause in some ways because I do feel like there's this whole it's very symptomized. Like we talk a lot about the symptoms, and I think there's so much more to it, but we can get it. Perimenopause is a fine word to use because a lot of us understand, it's that in and around menopause time. How I got into working in the perimenopause area, I guess, was I started out, I had a lot of hormone issues growing up. It started out with digestive issues, which morphed into hormone issues. I went through my whole healing journey with that, terrible periods, acne, all of that, birth control pill, everything, the whole gamut. And, really working to balance my own hormones. So I really got into working with hormones and as a holistic nutritionist, and then bringing some EFT work into that as well. And just, I was doing a lot of work actually with moms and tweens. So I kind of started, as I was kind of working into my niche of hormone health, I was doing some mother-daughter classes, working with some teens. But what I was realizing was all of the moms who were in these classes were kind of in that perimenopause phase. And they were learning so much along with their daughters, but sometimes the conversation would start to veer towards that. And I do speak to that with the girls as well, because I also want them to be aware of what their moms are going through, because there's such a parallel there. But I was like, just becoming more and more aware that the women who I was working with in that context just needed more support as well. And then a lot of my one-on-one clients were probably because of the age that I'm at, and they were drawn to what I was talking about, were in that stage as well. So it's kind of a natural, I think, progression sometimes as health and wellness practitioners, that we just kind of end up working with people who are, kind of at a similar place, or just, maybe what we've just recently gone through.
For sure, for sure. Would you say that you are in the perimenopause phase then, or the postmenopause phase?
I am definitely in the early to mid perimenopause phase. Yeah. So I'm at the time when we're recording this, I'm 43. So actually started to experience some symptoms quite early. So I would say late 30s. And that's actually when I kind of started to become aware of things, and started to like, okay, if I'm starting to experience some, and they were mild symptoms, they were things that I knew I could get under control. But I was like, if I'm starting to experience this now, it's time to start really working on it and really doing my research, because I do believe that we can, if we are really well nourished and I think as women, if we're, yeah, like I said, if we're well nourished and we're relatively calm and have our stress under control, that we can go through this relatively unscathed. Of course, there's all the extra personal development and all of that comes along with it. Like it is an initiation. But I really do think that we can really go through it relatively easily if we're well nourished and well, and fairly calm, I guess is, yeah, yeah.
And I
So
would agree with that 100%. I like we know, well, we've been taught that we can go into perimenopause as early as 35, maybe even a little bit earlier if there is some other health conditions that are kind of impacting that transition phase. But for myself, I was pregnant with my last son, my last child, and I gave birth at 38 and a half ish, almost 39. And that right then was when the pandemic hit too, right? So this was 2019. So I'm 38, I had a baby, I am in the pandemic, homeschooling two kids that are kindergarten and grade one. Not fun because they have no computer literacy whatsoever. So stress is a little high. And I'm breastfeeding. And so for me, I'm sure if even if just the baby and the breastfeeding was removed, I might have started to see some signals and shifts in my cycle. But for me, I just kept writing everything off to being postpartum, or that I'm breastfeeding. And then I breastfed for quite a bit because of the pandemic and because we just didn't know how it was going to affect babies. And so it was almost 3 years that I breastfed him. So by the time I started breastfeeding, I'm in my 40s, and I came out. I remember going to my naturopath going, my cycle's really short. Like I'm now 42 or 41, I think I was at the time. And I was like, I'm at a 2-day cycle and it's pretty scanty. Like, is this something to worry about? But it's so hard to determine because of these other factors. But now knowing more about perimenopause and what's happening in our body, I can definitely say that those were not just, post baby or breastfeeding signals in the body. That was a lot of this transition already kicking into place. And I'm sure some women listening to this are like, wow, 2-day cycle and it's scanty. For me, that was kind of scary because because of what I was learning about my hormones, it also meant that this could be impacting my health, right? Because our period is our vital sign. Am I lacking nutrients somewhere? So we went on this deep dive of trying to figure out my gut health, my nutrients, what's all happening so that I could amplify my period a little bit more, and just support it if it was in this transition phase. So thank you for sharing that. We're the same age. So
yes. Absolutely. And I remember actually going to my doctor as well, kind of, yeah, towards the end of COVID stuff, and thinking that too is like, yeah, my periods are really like, and I for a long time, my periods I didn't really have heavy periods anyway. And they were kind of that 3 to 4 days, but yeah, they were kind of getting to more of that, 2 days, quite light. Sometimes I didn't even really have to even wear a pad or anything. Like it was, and it almost seemed it almost seemed, have been using a menstrual cup for years, almost seemed not necessary to even wear one. And yeah, and then now I've kind of progressed out of that. My cycles tend to be a little bit more sporadic. Now it's typically a little bit the cycle itself is longer, and things will kick off a little bit heavier. And yeah, it's just kind of a more regular length now. So I do think I'm kind of, moving into that next stage of perimenopause. But yeah, I guess we'll see how things progress.
And I guess for anyone that's listening, like this is all normal. Like this is, I think, like we just hear about hot flashes and about the rage. I remember the rage with my mother, and I'm feeling the rage in myself. But there's so much more. It's kind of a little frightening sometimes when all of a sudden you have a period and you don't have a period, and you're like, what's going on? And for some of us, we're like, yay, but then it comes back and it's like heavy. Like I remember my mom talking a lot about how it was really hard on her mental health because she wouldn't have one for 3 months and then she would get one, but she would bleed for almost 2 weeks and it would be heavy and it'd be flooding and she didn't know what was wrong. And she was constantly in the doctor's office and not getting answers. So this can work a lot on our psyche when we really don't know what is normal. And I guess for every woman, these changes, these shifts that are happening, all of it is in the realm of normal. There's lots that we can do about it, which is what we're going to talk about today. But yeah,
what we can do. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. And it's also, I think, we did come out of a very stressful time for so many people. And I do think that, well, I know that, we've seen perimenopause kind of shift backwards a little bit more, age wise. We start to see symptoms earlier, just kind of like almost like we see puberty hitting a little bit earlier now. And that could be just so many different, attributed to so many different things. And I do think stress has a lot to do with it because, we're going to see more symptoms if our adrenal glands are already taxed because those are what take over producing those hormones. So they can't produce the hormones because of everything else that's going on because, those sex hormones aren't typically the priority. Then we're going to see those symptoms pop up sooner, faster, harder. And then also, our exposure to environmental toxins and things like that too, that I think is really contributing to this whole picture of earlier and earlier perimenopause and the exacerbation of the symptoms for women.
yeah. I was just at an event this weekend for the Menopause Mission. We hold events twice a year, one in October for Menopause Month, and then another one in May. And our keynote speaker, that was her message. She was sharing her story of what she went through. And she said, this is not your mother's menopause. What women are experiencing now is a whole new form of menopause. It's not what our mothers went through or our grandmothers went through. And I think that's important to know because linking back to what you just said, we are under a different stress compression tank, it almost feels like sometimes, because they have multiple kids and they don't have the support from extended family a lot of times because in our now world, we move away from our homes, we move away from our family. We have careers. We're always pushing at so many different levels. And I think for women, our environment has changed so much, more so than it has potentially for men, because a lot of the same expectations are still there. And that might be just how I feel. I love my husband, but I feel like I am juggling planning dance classes and getting my kids to where they need to be and managing a household and having a career and not sleeping at night because I'm thinking about what I didn't get done that night before, right? And it can feel really overwhelming. And I think like what you're talking about, the adrenal health is so important. So maybe we can touch on that a bit. Why is stress and adrenal health so impactful when it comes to what we're experiencing in perimenopause?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny. It's the first pillar that I teach with all of my work really around hormones because I think it's so imperative. And I mean, I know some practitioners dive into gut health right away. And I'm like, yes, gut is so important, but our gut health is going to be trash if our adrenals and our stress response is not taken care of. So it's the first place for me that I always start because we are so, like you said, compressed. We have that, it's almost like this lie that we're fed as women that we can have it all at the same time. So we can be, we can have the big education, the careers, the business, the the motherhood, the financial responsibilities, mental, emotional load, all of these things, the fit, healthy body, we get to look good too. We have this all at once. And yeah, sure, we might be able to, but something's got to give. So it's the adrenals. They're constantly under stress. So I guess the way that I can explain it the best is so when we're pre-puberty, our adrenals are producing the small amount of sex hormones that we do produce. So there's not a lot going on. There's not a lot of secondary sex characteristics. And then the ovaries take over as we hit puberty and go through our cycling years. So the ovaries are producing more of those sex hormones, the testosterone, the progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, those hormones that we need for our cycling years. And as we're starting to transition into perimenopause, the adrenals are starting to take over again. Ovaries are slowing their production. The more we're slowing down on our ovulation, they're starting to slow down those production, and the adrenals are meant to take that over again. But the adrenals were meant to have a little bit of a break during that time, those 20s, 30s, early 40s, and they didn't really get that break. So now they're still pumping out cortisol all the time, and they've been pumping out cortisol. They're a little bit fatigued. And when it comes to them now having to take over that sex hormone production, and we're fully equipped to produce the hormones that we need for every stage of life. But when our bodies haven't had that opportunity to rest and recalibrate during that time when the adrenals were supposed to have a little bit more of a break, then they're kind of struggling to keep up. And that's when we start to see a lot more symptoms pop up. So yes, by learning to nourish our adrenal glands, manage our stress, it really, really helps with those symptoms, because it's, then allowing those hormones to be produced by the adrenals.
Mm-hmm. And I think as much as we're talking about this in perimenopause, we have years, we have decades where we could practice really nurturing our adrenals. And that is through resting through our bleed days, through our period, or slowing down during that week that we quote unquote call PMS week, right? That luteal phase. If we could allow ourselves to feel the energy of down regulating and starting to allow ourselves the space and the capacity and the permission to be less, to rest, and to release expectation, and maybe set some better boundaries with those in our life. I think this creates the beautiful runway into perimenopause, where when we're starting to feel, what I'm feeling right now is a lot of this reclaiming who I am. It's no, you know what? I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't know why I did that for that many years, but I'm not doing it anymore. And so there's a lot more permission to say no in perimenopause if we've taken the time to really nurture that part of us that needs that down regulation. And we don't. We're taught to keep going, that, we get badges if we excel. We get badges if we can prove we can do many different things. We pride people on who are good multitaskers, which is the worst thing ever.
Even a thing. We can't really do it.
It's so funny when you look at brain science. Multitasking is not a thing. You cannot do it. Your brain's not designed for it. I remember telling my husband that, and he's like, really? And I was like, yes. So I'm not multitasking. I'm just failing at doing 10 things at once.
Oh my goodness. Oh, yeah, you're so right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where cyclical living, and, this is something that I teach my tweens and teens and women beyond, to tune into that a little bit more. And I'm not, I don't think we have to do hard and fast cycle syncing. And, I think that can create a little bit too much stress for women, but I do think leaning into that cyclical nature, that beautiful connection that we have with nature as women, and that cyclicity it's like practice every cycle for, yeah, that fall or that luteal season is like practice for that fall of life, that perimenopause type of season. So I think, yeah, if we can absolutely, if we can start to tune into that, even in our, like, even if you are starting to go through, through some of the symptoms of perimenopause, you can still lean into that cyclical nature and really prepare yourself. But if you're listening to this and you're earlier than that, yeah, like definitely take advantage of this monthly practice.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you keep referring back to this, and I think it's a beautiful conversation to have, because I think a lot of women sometimes are like, "Am I too late to learn this stuff? Like, I'm already 45 or I'm already 50. Like, why now? Like, I'm post-menopause. Why should I even learn about this stuff now?" And I always say it's so important to learn it because you are the lighthouse for these younger generations. And you keep referring back to the fact of like mothers and teens, mothers and teens. And there's this beautiful book. Well, at least I think it's beautiful. It's one of my favorites. It's called The Female Brain by Dr. Luann Brezendine. And it's amazing. It's very sciencey. It's all on the brain, but I was fascinated by it. And one of the things that she says in it is that what we're seeing in the modern world now is girls going into puberty at the exact same time moms are going into perimenopause because we're having kids later in life. And so there is something so beautiful for us to be learning about this in our own body and then mirroring that so we can encourage our daughters to do that, because I think that's what, in my personal opinion, there's no science behind this, but in my personal opinion, I think that's what's going to break a lot of, not even just the stigma, but a lot of the suffering that we're going through, is that if we can get into these practices earlier in life, if we can learn about the importance of our adrenals or the importance of nutrition and the importance of rest, how much of that is going to play into these girls not potentially having a lot of the diagnoses that women in our age category are going through right now, because we've just kept living the way that, I don't want to say that we're taught, but we feel like we have to, right? We're not given a different roadmap, another option. And so I think there's so much beauty in women that are perimenopausal or even postmenopausal to start tapping into this. The bleed is a physical thing. Ovulation's a physical thing. It does not mean that we don't have to tap into how we're energetically feeling. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people, is that somatic feeling inside of like, okay, how am I feeling today? And what does that kind of mimic in the cycle? And how can I honor that? And I think it's so powerful when we can tap into that, especially when we start skipping our periods, when we're not seeing them as frequently in perimenopause.
No, absolutely. It's funny. I was actually just teaching in my container last night, and we were talking about cyclical living, and it wasn't something that I was really going to touch on because it's my this is my midlife group, my midlife alchemy group, and I was like, I teach a lot about this with my younger women and younger girls, but it wasn't, but then I was starting to realize, I was like, I'm late in my late luteal phase right now. And just realizing how much I really need to tune into my cyclicity now, even more than when I was younger, than I was in my 30s. And yeah, just like I felt like I could just breeze through anyway. I could kind of push through my late luteal, early menstrual phase. I could, just do whatever. But now I really like, no, I'm like going to bed. Lights are out at this time. I have to, yeah, I really have to lean into that a little bit more. So like, yeah, we're going to touch on that because it's so important even in this phase. And I think, yeah, like you said, it's never too late. And I think, yes, mirroring that to our younger generation. It's so funny. I have my daughter's a teenager, and she's just started her period recently. And when she came home, I think it was day 2, and she came home from school and she's like, Mom, it should be illegal to have to go sit through class when you're on your period. Like, I don't think you should have to do that.
Mhm.
And not that she was really struggling, but she was tired. It was all new. And I was like, yeah, you're like, yeah, it's our society isn't set up for it, but this is coming. Like it's coming.
It is
So
coming.
she's just starting to learn. She already knows how to lean into it.
Mhm.
Just because,
That's
well, she's been hearing about it for so long. So whether she wanted to or not.
Same with the kids in my household. So this is everyday conversation. But I think it is true. It is so true. And I think this is why we set ourselves up for a really painful experience in perimenopause, because even after our first bleed, we are taught just ignore and push through versus being taught, like, unfortunately, the system is built this way. Unfortunately, you're going to have to sit in class for 7 hours and it's going to exhaust you and you're not going to feel great and you're going to want to come home. But what can you do when you finally get that break? And this is like bigger message for women than in the workplace. Because I always get like, well, this is a great concept and idea, but how does this actually apply? Like, how can I actually put this into practice? And it's like, well, what else can you take off? Can you just minimize 10 or 20% of your day during your bleed days? So like for me, I don't cook and I don't clean. Like I try to get all the laundry done as best as I can up until, well, probably 2 days before my bleed, because I start getting exhausted 2 days before my bleed. That's how I always know it's coming. And I shut down everything. And then a lot of the responsibility goes to my husband. I can't. I call him. I'm like, I'm on day one. I am done. And so like even this weekend, I was emceeing our event for the Perimenopause Association for the event. And I was on day 25 and I knew it. I was just like, I'm going to be exhausted. Like I should not be doing this, but I can't pick the dates. So, and I really wanted to do it. I was super excited about doing it. So I didn't want to turn it down, although like maybe I should have. But I went and I showed up and I did the thing and I gave myself lots of self-compassion to forget words or be like, what was that train of thought? I do not remember. And just be a little bit slower, right? Like I gave myself permission to lean into what I needed. But I also told my husband I was going to be home an hour later than what I knew I'd be. So that way there was no stress on me of going, when are you going to be home again? Like, can you pick up this from the grocery store? Like I had to make sure that it was like, I'm going to be home at 6 p.m. So you have to have everything already ready for supper. So there was no stopping for me, right? Like I knew I needed to set myself up for success. And then I came home and I like went to bed at 8:30, first of all, but I didn't do anything. Like I got up to eat supper that was already made for me. Like I vegged out. But this is the permission. This is the thing that when we don't know it, we don't know how to set ourselves up for that success.
Hey ladies, if you're feeling stuck in the cycle of burnout, overwhelm, and just feeling out of tune with your body, I've got something transformative for you. Introducing Cyclical, Reclaiming You. It's a 9-month program designed to help you tap into the power of your natural hormonal cycles and reclaim the balance in your life. Whether you're juggling a demanding career, motherhood, or just trying to make time for you, this program is about syncing your life with your body's natural rhythms to create more ease and joy. Over 9 months, you'll be guided through hormone hacks, sacred feminine practices, and deep wellness tools to help you not just survive, but to thrive. You'll learn how to balance your hormones, prevent burnout, and harmonize your feminine energy so you can show up as the most empowered self. Ladies, you don't have to keep running on empty. This is your time to reclaim your health, vitality, and the life that you deserve and have dreamed of. Head to the link in the show notes below for the Cyclical program and sign up today. And as an extra special bonus, for this round only of the Cyclical program, I am offering a discount of 50%. This is a one-time offer that will never happen again. So make sure you go in and click on the link in the show notes to get this one-time special offer. Join Cyclical, Reclaiming You, and start living with intention. You are so worth it.
Yes. Yeah. And everything's going to still be there when you're, when the energy comes out. And when you do lean into that, then this is something that I know I learned earlier on in, just pushing through some, like, I don't find I push through as much anymore now, but when I still was like learning about cyclicity and syncing with the menstrual cycle and everything, I would still sometimes feel really good when I started, early menstrual phase. I'd be like, yeah, I'm just going to keep doing everything because I still feel good. But what I really learned was that if I didn't take that extra time to rest, if I didn't kind of, just pull back a little bit, that it was later on that I was like, oh yeah. So I was like, when I should have been feeling more energetic, I was like, now I'm exhausted because I didn't listen when I should have. So I definitely, I get that 100%. If I have, for me, I a little bit more introverted. So if I have public speaking events during my early menses or late luteal, then that's when I really have to pull back on other things.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite. I like to get in the kitchen. That's my time. I was like, I just like to be in the kitchen and create at that time. So sometimes it's other things that go to the wayside. It's my social media and it's all of that stuff that I'm like, no, I can't, no energy for that right now.
So to all the listeners out there, if you follow Mandy and you don't see anything on social media or the newsletter, it's because she's in that time of either coming up to her period or her period. And same with me. If you notice that all of a sudden I've like ghosted you for 2 weeks, it's because I've had to let something go because I can't function in life right now. And it's all because of my cycle. So you can understand where we are in our cycle by looking at our social media account.
You might see me showing up in stories, posting all the things that I'm cooking.
Or other people's things. That's what I do. I'm still active. I posted somebody else's stuff. So yes. Now you have a big, big interest in nutrition. Like that is your first wheelhouse. I would be really interested in what are some top tips that you would give to women in this midlife area on how they could really support themselves in perimenopause or menopause with food, with even just concepts around nourishing the body.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So first, so I've been a registered holistic nutritionist for over 20 years now, I think over 20 years. So that is my wheelhouse, and I love food. I love being in the kitchen, and I love food as medicine. So I would say the number one thing when it comes to nutrition and perimenopause is blood sugar balance. I think this, so much of, for, just people in general, it's such an important concept because so much of our population is metabolically unhealthy. But especially as we come into this transition time of, our hormones fluctuating, we do, as estrogen starts to naturally decline, we do become more insulin sensitive. So we do tend to be, edge on that metabolic dysregulation a little bit more. So just leaning into being a little bit more adamant about blood sugar regulation. So we want to be doing things like making sure we're getting enough protein in, and not that, yes, protein is really, really important. It's not the only macronutrient. I think we're kind of led to believe that in media now. And I do think it's really important, especially, as we start to age, we don't absorb it quite as easily. We do start to lose muscle mass as well. So it's really important to support that with adequate protein. So I like to say around that 30 grams of protein per main meal. Aiming for around 100 grams a day as a woman. It can be a little bit more if you're really active, or, if you are, it depends on body size, and there's so many different factors, what your goals are, but in and around that. So, and then also making sure we're getting good, healthy carbohydrates in, but we want to be aiming for those carbohydrates that are a little bit more slow burning. So I really like the roots and fruits. So root vegetables, winter squashes are really great as well. Kind of leaning into those ones that are really nutrient rich as well. So, whole grains, if you tolerate them well. I really like to cook, my whole grains and bone broth to give them those extra nutrients. So mixing that in, and I could kind of go for that equal, like kind of, same amount of carbohydrates as protein to start out with, just kind of equal portions or equal grams. And then those good healthy fats as well that are going to help to satiate us and really support hormone production too. So making sure that we are having those good balanced meals, a good protein focus. And then eating, meal timing is really important too. So making sure that we're getting meals in at good intervals. So I like to say have your first protein rich meal within 60 minutes of waking. This can be some, sometimes it's hard with kids if depending on what your routine is like. Um, I find it easier now. I've got older, my daughter's older, so I often have breakfast before she does. But if that means just something quick, like, if you're having a protein smoothie or something like that, if you can get that in before you get your first main meal in, that's okay too. But I would say, within that first hour, and then 3 good balanced meals throughout the day. And for women, a lot of women, I say, throw in an extra snack there too, in between that time that's the most in between, that you have the most time in between your meals. So if that for you, you have a long period between breakfast and lunch, you might want a mid-morning snack. For a lot of women, that's between lunch and dinner. There's a lot going on in that time period. So I'd say, get something in, a good balanced snack in within that time. I love to have I like elixirs and things like that during this time, because that time of day, I want something kind of cozy. I want, I find that sometimes easy too, because I can have that and sip on it while I'm still working away at whatever I'm doing. And then my elixirs tend to have bone broth, or they have raw milk or something like that in them. So there's some good protein in there. So it's a good balance. But whatever works for you as far as a snack. So I think that's, just paying attention to that is really important. And, making sure you've got good protein sources prepped and ready to go, because those tend to be the hardest things for us to just grab. It's not, proteins they need to be cooked usually. There are options. There's some great, grass-fed beef sticks and things like that, but just making sure that you've got things that you can easily grab, that makes that a lot easier for you. So if that means spending a little bit of time, doing a little bit of ingredient prep, a couple hours, a couple times a week, then that's going to make your life a lot easier too.
I have 2 questions. One is because I've done this, I've added bone broth when cooking rice. Does the bone broth count as a protein when doing it in your rice as well? Does that up your grams of protein a bit?
It will up your grams of protein, definitely. I would say there's about 10 grams of protein per cup of bone broth. So yeah, just so you keep that into account. You're not usually having a full cup of, say if you cook a batch of rice and you're using 2 cups of bone broth, well, you're probably not eating one full, half that batch of rice at once. So it's going to up your protein a little bit, but yeah, it's not probably super significantly, but
it always helps every little bit. That's where I'm at right now, is trying to get enough protein in, because that was one of the feedbacks I had gotten from my naturopathic doctor with this perimenopause shifts that I'm going through, was to up my protein. But it's hard. It is really hard, unless if you're using protein bars and powder, it feels like sometimes. It feels like I'm using all these, I don't want to call them artificial, but you know what I mean? That they're not in my head, it's not the true meat source. So it's nice to know that even if it's 1 or 2 extra grams I'm getting in, because I've done this one simple thing, it's nice. And then the other one is collagen or collagen peptides. Yay, nay.
Yes. So from what I've been learned, so what I've researched about collagen, and it is not, unfortunately, a complete source of protein, because I think it is lacking a couple of the amino acids that we need, but it is great for gut health and great for, for skin health and all of that. So I think it's still beneficial to include. And I always throw it in I'll throw it in my morning drink, or, in my matcha, things like that. And I do think, no, it's not a complete source of protein. So I wouldn't necessarily count it as if I'm having a couple scoops in my matcha, that it's a 10 gram of protein drink now. But, I think it does in general up things a little bit. I still think it's a beneficial thing to throw in. I wouldn't necessarily count it towards your complete protein intake for the day, though.
Right.
Yeah.
And to share a little bit of a personal story here, because this was another side. Well, I think this was like a secondary sign of like something's definitely shifty. Like my periods getting lighter were an obvious one that I first started to address. But then about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, my father passed away. And it was unexpected and it was a big shock. And there was a lot that I, as the oldest child of the family, took on. I won't say I had to. I chose to take on and micromanage. And it hit me about 2 months later. Everything was fine. And then 2 months later, it felt like overnight, I gained 20 pounds. Like it was just like, oof. And I remember going to my naturopath going, I'm having anxiety for the first time in my life. I'm having panic attacks, which I've never had. You know, my periods are doing this weird, scanty, short thing. And now, like, I've gained 20 pounds. Like, I don't feel good in my body, but I don't know what to do. Like, everything I've done before, running, rock climbing, all those things, nothing's working. It's actually felt like it was making it worse, right? Most of the time. And it was because, like we have already talked about, adrenals. That was the first thing. She was like, first, we have to get your stress under control. Like a lot of what you're showing me right now is that your adrenals are way, like they're being taxed right now. We have to address that. And then our second thing is like, and then we have to include way more protein in your diet because we have to create that saturation feeling in your body that you feel full, right? Because a lot of what you're feeling right now is creating this wanting sugar or carbs and so forth. And so it's interesting that the two things that you've really touched on today have been the adrenal health and the protein, which for anyone listening, because I don't think enough women talk about this. I think once again, this is a thing that we shame. Like all of a sudden we've exploded in our body size and we're like, what happened? I don't fit any of my clothes. We feel disgusted with ourselves. We blame ourselves a lot. And we hold a lot of shame around it because we don't feel attractive with our partners. We don't like, we want to hide. And at least that was my story. I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out of this. And it was a spiral shame. And it was really empowering for me to learn more about that this was one byproduct of perimenopause, and that it was also a byproduct of like what you're talking about, of this insulin sensitivity, this not enough protein, and the fact that I was stressed the F out, right? And how much that was impacting. And yes, like you could say that mine was circumstantial, but realistically, I think we become way more stress sensitive in this phase of life and with these shifts in hormones. So whether it is that we've now taken on elderly parents, whether it's that we're dealing with unexpected deaths, whether it's that we have teenagers that are raging in our household. I have two girls. It's coming. I know. But this is all added stress. This is all these things that all of a sudden start to amplify that as women, we don't ask for help with and we deal with, and then we start to hate our body with. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that because I really feel like anyone that might be listening, if you're going through that, these things that Mandy's just shared, like these are important factors. This is what I've been doing to help to hopefully someday adjust my body shape and size, but also to come back into a place where I actually know that I'm nurturing it. And there's so much, like, I can't say that I've lost any weight yet, but there's more self-love and I'm nourishing my body with what it needs. Like when I put food in my mouth now, it's not like, crap, I just did that. I wonder how that's going to affect my body. Instead, it's like, I just did that and it feels good because I know I made the choice that I needed for my body. Like now I'm more cognitive of a lot of things and I know the impact will come, but there's also a lot more self-love for my body. And I just went shopping and bought clothes that just fit now. Like, enough trying to squeeze into things because I don't know if this is going to change and I'm tired of hating my body, right? And so these are the things that I think we sometimes go through and we never talk about.
No. And yes, there's so much truth to what you said there. And yes, so touching a little bit more on the physical, yes, like, maybe one tip is like start with your protein. Eat your protein first. You're going to feel so much more satiated and you're going to be less likely to grab those quick, easy carbohydrates that are just going to, spike your insulin and then have you crash. Plus, it's going to support muscle health, which is like metabolic spanks. Like it's going to, the more muscle you have on your frame, which is why when I talk about movement with women, it's like, yes, we want to be building muscle as much as possible. So weights and walking. And if you are at a place that you are feeling stressed or depleted, no, you're maybe not going to start with like, going to the gym and lifting heavy, but you can do things like Pilates, yoga, weight bearing exercises, things that feel nourishing, and yeah, walking. So things that aren't going to cause you a lot of stress. You can even wear a weighted backpack or weighted vest if you want to add a little bit of resistance, but you don't want to be taxing your adrenals with that, that running or whatever you were doing before that, Orange Theory or CrossFit, whatever it was, that can be taxing if you're already in a depleted state. So there is that. And then also, our bodies are meant to change throughout this transition. Just like, you wouldn't, if you have a daughter that's going through puberty and she's starting to, get hips, get a bum, get breasts, like you wouldn't be like, oh, well, you should look like you looked when you were 8.
Mm-hmm.
We are not supposed to look at 50 like we looked at 30. We all shift at a different time, but we are metabolic. We're meant to have an extra 5 to 20 pounds ish, depending on the size of our frames. And that's also because fat cells do produce some estrogen too. So it's a bit of a protective thing. So we need to learn to love those extra, as much as, yes, we want to be within, we want to be protecting our health and making sure, we're still cardiovascular healthy, healthy that way. And, making sure our body composition is healthy, but we are meant to have a little bit of extra body fat on. So that's, just know that as well. Like that's something you need to learn to love as much as it can be. Society doesn't make that easy sometimes, but yeah.
Society doesn't talk about it. Like,
no.
Let's be realistic. There's no magazine that says, welcome to perimenopause, you're 20 pounds heavier.
And that's normal. Like, what are you, instead we're talking about, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to, how are we going to medicate ourselves so that we can stay the same and not go through these transitions? And that's a whole other controversial area, but.
Well, and I was reading a book by Kate Cardington called Second Spring. It's all on perimenopause. And that when I read in that book where she wrote that we are supposed to be about, well, it could be range, but up to 20 pounds heavier than we were in our 20s and our 30s. I was like, why did anyone tell me this? This alone makes me feel better.
And, if we can have that, if we can create more muscle and have that, then that's great too. But again, we are meant to have that little bit of extra fat that's protective for us at this time of life. So,
yes. This has been such a great conversation. And I know we could go on forever because I would love to learn more about blood sugar and so forth. We might just have to have you come back to talk more about all of the goodness here. But we are at time. And so I always love ending these calls with just a little nugget of information. I always call it the womb-led tip, but like some kind of cycle or hormonal wisdom that you can leave our guests with today. Just one little nugget of truth that's for you.
Let's see. As when we just have this beautiful connection with nature that it's a gift for us to lean into this. So again, whether that's leaning into the time, giving yourself the space to lean into that through your cycle, whether it's your luteal phase or if it's that perimenopausal phase of life, just giving yourself the permission to lean into that, learning to give yourself the space, say no a little bit more, just setting up those boundaries and just knowing that, if you're supporting yourself in that, then the next generation is going to learn that too.
I love it. And you have a course called Midlife Alchemy, if I'm correct, right? Yes. Okay. And this is a lot of what you talk about in there. You talk about how you can feed and nourish your body and how you can really take care of the body in this phase of midlife, of perimenopause / menopause. I throw menopause in there, but this work that we're doing is to help us through that menopause transition. So if anybody is in this phase of life and you're looking for more of this, if you're really wanting to understand food, adrenals, the liver, how we can really support the body during this time, check out Mandy's course, Midlife Alchemy. All of her contact information, how you can follow her on Instagram, her website, all of that will be in the show notes below. So please go and check her out. And thank you so much, Mandy, for being on the podcast today. I loved this conversation, and we will have you back for more.
Thank you so much, Kate. It was so great to be with you and learn more about your journey as well.
Friends, have you had a chance to download my new free ebook? Maybe it's not you. The Truth on PMS and How You Can Take Back Control of Your Cycle is now available. This is truly a book that I think needs to be in the hands of every woman who struggles with the second half of their menstrual cycle. So if this is you, click on the link in the show notes and download your free copy today. And remember to subscribe to this podcast and share a review if you loved this episode. Until next time, remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living.